Hi, this is going to be a reading of the Federalist 83. It is the longest Federalist paper, and I mean it is long. The main thing that Hamilton tries to discuss in this last paper about the judiciary, the judicial branch of the government, is answering the Anti-Federalists who are saying that because you don't mention trial by jury in civil cases, you're trying to do away with it and endanger the liberties of people of the country. Back then in 1780s, it was very important to have trial by jury. People trusted having 12 people judge on the facts of something more than they trusted one judge talking about it. So in the Constitution, it guarantees a person's right to a trial by jury in criminal cases. But it doesn't mention anything about trial by jury in civil cases. So a group of Anti-Federalists were attacking this provision, and rightly so. This is one of those 6 papers that he mentions the Anti-Federalists by name, because they've got under his skin. So he says, no, if we had to put trial by jury for civil cases in the Constitution, it would make it complicated, because then you'd have to have trial by jury for all the cases that you don't need a jury for. And that would just make the working of the government much harder. What we have done, he says, we've put it in the hands of the national legislature, federal legislature, to decide what cases need to be tried, what civil cases need to be tried by jury. That would be better. The federal Constitution will give you the framework, but will not give you every detail, because if they were to put every detail, it'll be hundreds of pages, hundreds of provisions. And then he looks at examples of different states, how they go about assigning jury trials to civil cases. And he says, look, these are all different. So what we have done is leave it in the hands of the national legislature. These are, after all, people that you will be electing, directly or indirectly. So they'll know what you want and they'll do the best for you. Now, keep in mind that this is towards the end of Hamilton's work. He's getting tired. He's been in the Constitutional Convention. Now he's come back and he's been constantly defending this Constitution. By the time he got to Federalist 78, he'd already printed, the Federalist 78 to 85 came in volume 2 of the books he'd printed of the Federalists. So remember, Federalist 78 and 85 came out first in the book format. They were already part of a book. So he's kind of like trying to finish his arguments, his defense of the provisions of the Constitution. He's tired because he's being attacked. Madison, remember, left and went back to Virginia to be elected to the ratifying convention of Virginia. That was important for him to be there. So you can see that it's the last of his arguments. And one thing that we have to be thankful to the Anti-Federalists, because they forced these supporters of the Constitution to make sure that they work on what became the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. Because as you will see here, Hamilton, in the next paper, he'll say, well, we don't really need a Bill of Rights. The Constitution provides provisions which people's safety will be secure, liberties will be secure. So you can kind of give him a little credit because he's been working on this for so long. It's hard. It's been hard on him. Plus, This is not the exact constitution he wanted. He wanted a strong central government. So without saying it on paper, he's saying, look, we've given you more than you wanted already. If it were up to me, I would just make it a really strong central government. But the way we had to work out a compromise is to have states have a lot to say in what goes on in the workings of the government. So keep that in mind. As great as these guys were, they were trying to slack off on what became the Bill of Rights, and it was the Anti-Federalists that forced the issue. They said, no, you got to promise us that you will have a Bill of Rights as soon as the first Congress of the United States meets. And that's what Madison ended up doing. He actually guided the whole process, so he gets a lot of credit. I'm not sure if it were left to Hamilton, he would do the same. During my reading of this and recording of the Federalist Papers, if you've noticed, I have been putting on the playlist the recording done by the volunteers at LibriVox. So listen to those two, like the one that's done for Federalist 83 is very slow and it's good for immigrants. The rest of them, some of them are done too fast, so it won't be good for somebody who wants to hear it the first time. So I've tried to include those to let you know that later on there's an option that you can go to after you've heard it the first time, maybe the second time, maybe my reading, because I've tried to read it slowly and explain it to you a little bit. But remember, the books that I've mentioned, those books are very important. Like in this paper, reading of this paper, I cannot explain all the details. So I've shown you books, I've referred you to books in the previous videos that will kind of look at some of these Federalist Papers and give you more of an in-depth understanding of them. So let me go ahead and read a paragraph or so here, and it pretty much tells you what he's going to be talking about. Hamilton says, the objection to the plan of the convention. The objection, remember, every time he says to the plan of the convention, he's talking about the Constitution that we want you to ratify, which has met with most success in this state. A lot of people have backed this criticism of this Constitution, especially in this state, and perhaps in several of the other states, is that criticism relative to the want of a constitutional provision for the trial by jury in civil cases, because we've left that out. So everybody's been criticizing us, and it seems like it's a popular criticism. The disingenuous form in which this objection is usually stated has been repeatedly adverted and exposed. He says, we've shown you before how disingenuous some of these criticisms and critics are, but continues to be pursued in all the conversations and writings of the opponents of the plan. Apparently we haven't done a good job, because it just continues to be printed and put on New York papers, and people are actually supporting that criticism. The mere silence of the Constitution in regard to civil causes is represented as an abolition of the trial by jury. Just because we haven't mentioned that civil cases will get jury trials, the way these critics are talking about, as if we are just totally doing away with trial by juries, and we're not going to have trial by juries, which you know it's a lie. And the declamations to which it has afforded a pretext are artfully calculated to induce a persuasion that this pretended abolition is complete and universal, that we have totally done away with jury trials. Extending not only to every species of civil, not every case of civil case, but even to criminal causes. To argue with respect to the latter would, however, be as vain and fruitless as to attempt the serious proof of the existence of the matter, or to demonstrate any of those propositions which by their own internal evidence force conviction when expressed in language adapted to convey their meanings. So he says, we're not going to spend much time arguing with everything these people say, because you know that the Constitution says you have a right to jury trials in criminal cases. So we're just not going to even pay attention to half of the lies they're putting out there. But to the part that they say, we haven't mentioned anything about jury trial in civil cases, we'll have to address that. We'll have to talk about it. Okay. So we'll continue reading this. Please remember and look at the books. When you get a chance, look at the books that I have mentioned to you about understanding these Federalist Papers a little bit more in depth. Like one of the places that I've referred you to is teachingamericanhistory.org. They've got a summary of every one of these papers. All these source material are accessible there in National Archives and a few other places. As you learn more about the Federalist Papers and work on it, you can actually find out where the other resources are that you can tap into. So we'll continue in the next video. This is going to be a pretty long one. And remember, one of the anti-federalists that he mentions is Brutus, the same one that has written a series of great articles criticizing Hamilton, especially in the Federalist Papers. So we'll return to paragraph 2, and I'll just continue reading, and I think you will get the gist of it as we go through it. Thank you.